What's up, everyone, and welcome to another episode where we're going to talk about the situation in the Ukraine, and specifically the distributed denial of service cyber attack against the Ukrainian government and some of the country's largest banks. This attack left people, ordinary, normal, run-of-the-mill people like your neighbors or work colleagues, in many cases unable to access their money in the bank. Well, access to money is critical for many, if not all of these people. We're talking about taxi drivers, shop owners, supermarkets, checkout staff. Now, I hope you'll watch the entire episode, but in case you already know the story, you can now skip directly to my insights at the end of the episode, right from the timeline below. For the rest of you, let's go through the story together and see what we can learn to protect ourselves and others.
Oh, drat these computers. They're so naughty and so complex. I could pinch them.
The Ministry of Defense and the Armed Forces of the Ukraine and two of the country's state-owned banks, the Privatbank, which is Ukraine's largest bank, and Ощадbank, which is the state savings bank, are being hammered by distributed denial of service attacks. Now, the armed forces of the Ukraine are composed of the Ukrainian Ground Force, the Ukrainian Navy, the Ukrainian Air Force, and the Ukrainian Air Mobile Forces. Now, the Ukrainians' naval forces also maintain their own small Ukrainian Naval Infantry Force, as well as their own Ukrainian Naval Aviation Force. Ukraine's Cyberpolice also reported that the bank customers received text messages claiming that bank ATMs were down, adding that they were part of an information attack and do not necessarily correspond to wider reality. The Ukrainian Ministry of Defense, whose site has been taken down following the attack, said that its website was probably attacked by a distributed denial of service attack, which is an excess number of requests per second per record. Congratulations, you're doing a great job by wanting to learn about the attacks against the Ukrainian military agencies and the banks. I appreciate your support by watching my episode about it. If you're new to my channel and have not already, please consider subscribing to my channel and smashing the bell to be notified when I upload new episodes where I give you insights into the newest important cybersecurity news stories like this one. With my insights, you can be better prepared to protect your company, your family, and yourself against these and other cyber attacks. So hit the subscribe button now and let's continue to learn about this story together. Starting from the afternoon of February 15th, there was a powerful distributed denial of service attack on a number of information resources of the Ukraine. The Ukraine's State Service for Special Communication Information Protection is added. In particular, this caused interruptions in the work of web services of Privatbank and Ощadbank. The websites of the Ministry of Defense and the Armed Forces of Ukraine were also attacked. While the Ukrainian Defense Ministry's site has been knocked out, Ощadbank's and Privatbank's websites still are accessible, although customers cannot log in to their online banking accounts. And the Ukraine Center for Strategic Communications and Information Security said in a Facebook message that Privatbank users have been reporting problems with payments and with the bank's mobile app. Starting from the afternoon of February 15th, there was a powerful distributed denial of service attack on a number of information resources of the Ukraine. The Ukraine's State Service for Special Communication Information Protection is added. In particular, this caused interruptions in the work of web services of Privatbank and Ощadbank. The websites of the Ministry of Defense and the Armed Forces of Ukraine were also attacked. While the Ukrainian Defense Ministry's site has been knocked out, Ощadbank's and Privatbank's websites still are accessible, although customers cannot log in to their online banking accounts. And the Ukraine Center for Strategic Communications and Information Security said in a Facebook message that Privatbank users have been reporting problems with payments and with the bank's mobile app. So what can we learn? I cannot count how many times I've been asked on other platforms like Quora, for example, what would a country-sponsored act of cyber war look like? Or why don't we treat attacks like this as acts of war? Well, of course, I think I gave great answers over there. And this looks like a textbook example of a country, all fingers are pointing at Russia, opening up the first shot in terms of starting a real act of cyber war. We're talking about knocking out state-owned banks and government agencies, web presence, and web services of the military. And according to Doug Madry, the director of internet analysis at the network management firm Kentic Incorporated, the attackers did this by targeting the hosting provider of those entities, the hosting provider who should have these types of mitigations capabilities present. These distributed denial of service attacks are completely knocking these government entities offline. Can you imagine if Facebook or Twitter were offline, we cry and moan when our internet access is slow. Well, what if our favorite services or our bank service isn't available? What if you couldn't access your bank to withdraw money to, say, go to the movies, using cash, of course? Or what if, you wanted to pay with credit card or Apple Pay and, it just didn't work because your bank is being attacked with a distributed denial of service attack and none of its services can work? There's no buttered popcorn for you. Your light bill, maybe it gets paid, maybe not, who knows? You can't even check because you can't access your bank's online interface. Now that's bad, but the Ministry of Defense and the Armed Forces website services are also under attack. Now that would probably start a kind of panic in any country. It is important to note, of course, that the deposits in the banks were not affected and, the actual military communication was not affected. But that should not diminish the symbolism of a country fairly openly attacking another country using cyber warfare. And don't forget, on January 14th, long before the situation escalated to the current level, a cyber attack happened that damaged servers at Ukraine's state emergency service and at the Motor Transport Insurance Bureau with a malicious wiper cloaked as ransomware. I think this scenario we're watching play out right now, at least some of us are, of course, is something that is going to happen more and more. Now, it might not always be so plain as day in your face in terms of knowing who's doing it, but we have seen distributed denial of service mechanisms, for example, used in a variety of attacks, recently with Microsoft blocking 3 or 4 terabits per second attacks and Cloudflare blocking 2 to 3 terabits per second attacks. And ransomware groups, they have also implemented distributed denial of service as a third leg of their attack scheme to get companies to pay the ransom. So they steal your information, they encrypt your files, and then they threaten to do a DDoS attack against you if you don't pay. So if we're smart, we'll integrate anti-distributed denial of service attack services into our infrastructure from any number of providers. Now, the largest are, of course, Amazon's AWS Shield, Microsoft Azure's DDoS protection, and Cloudflare. But, of course, there are others. Clearly, the Ukrainian banks, defense ministry, and the armed forces of the Ukraine are not using these services. It's in your best interest to talk internally at your company to see what services you have, whether your website or other web-facing interfaces used by employees and customers, that should be protected by a DDoS mitigation tool. With that, I say thanks again for watching. Don't forget to share and subscribe if you haven't already, and smash the bell if you haven't already. And I'll see you on the next episode. Take care.
Don't forget to ride. Farewell.